You mentioned the reporting that goes on, or lack of, for some of these vaccines. You go back to the flu shot, and there does seem to be reporting. 2 years ago, I think, they said there was maybe 9% effective for a certain population. Maybe it was the elderly, I can't remember. In this most recent year, I think the effectiveness for the main vaccine was 47%. And I look at those numbers and I'm like, well, 9% is nothing. 40% is better than 50. You know, it's not even 50-50. What are your chances of getting the flu either way? Probably, you know, not as good as even that. Those numbers to me don't seem to support the effectiveness of the vaccine.
No, and they consider like 70 to 80% really good, and so for some strains, some years it might be that high. But you know, they removed the inhaled influenza vaccine this year because it was only 3% effective, and you know, people assume that they go and they get their child vaccinated and they're going to be protected even after one shot. But the fact is that even after 3 or 4 shots of some vaccines, you're only 65 to 85% protected. Even with the measles vaccine, there are between 2 and 10% of people who take that vaccine who never respond to it. So they're called primary non-responders. So they're susceptible. And you know, the reason they added the second shot, it wasn't for a booster. The second shot was added to that program around 1990 to mop up that 2 to 10% who never responded in the first place. But the problem is that those 2 to 10% don't really have that much higher of a chance of responding by again. They have somewhat higher, but not a perfect response rate even after that second shot. So, you know, it's a real kind of lack of it's a false sense of security that doctors and parents have after vaccines, that they're necessarily protected, and they're not. And even if they do work initially, there's no guarantee that they stay. You know, the more you say, for instance, the more pertussis vaccines a person gets over their lifetime, the shorter they actually respond to it for the shorter period of time. So us as adults, you know, our protection might last 6 months to 2 years, whereas as a child, they just keep giving more and more and more of them, trying to build that immunity. So that's one problem with this feeling that the vaccines are protected. But you mentioned influenza, and there's something that a lot of people are unaware of, and I think this is a really important point to make about influenza vaccines, which is that you're talking about the effectiveness in the year that it's given. Then the following year, there could be a whole 3 or 4 new strains of influenza circulating. Well, there's plenty of medical literature and epidemiologic evidence that if you've taken an influenza vaccine on year 1, that your risk of contracting influenza on year 2 is higher, your risk of getting a pandemic strain is higher, and your risk of shedding and spreading the virus for longer periods of time is higher as a result of what that vaccine did to your immune system the year before. That's a really important point that I think needs to really be hammered home to people, is that even if you are protected that first year that you got the vaccine, it has changed your immune system in such a way that your T cells can't respond using memory response. And so you are actually more susceptible than a person who's never been vaccinated. And that's been proven in medical literature. I speak about this publicly with the references on a regular basis.